Hi, I'm Rochelle, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. We are done with the Asian Readathon, Read Asian Literature Month, and I am now shortly going to present the 5 books that I have read for the 5 prompts that were created by with Cindy for this readathon. The first book, or I should say books that I read, was for the prompt international/underappreciated. And the books that I have sort of read for this is in the international category. It's not necessarily appreciated, sadly. But this is from an author from Bahrain, and that is 3 short stories by M.D. Khamil, The Vault, Don't Pick Up the Phone, and Stranger. So what the international prompt is that just read an author that's not from your country. And I know that all of these 3 were given quite a low score, and I do understand why they were given low scores. These 3 are horror thriller short stories published for free on Kobo, and they're not good. They're not well written. And I think partly is because these 3 are written in English, and I don't think English is his first language. That is kind of the sad thing about sort of the international reading market today, that a lot of people will write in English because that's where you have a market if you aren't picked up by your local market and then later translated by an official translator. So I don't know if that is one of the problems because, again, they're not, the concepts are interesting, but the writing is quite poor. The writing, it's almost like he is using the language of film more than understanding the language of storytelling in a written medium. For example, The Vault, which is about 3 thieves, where 2 are sort of sells out the third one, and the third one is sealed in this vault. And there you have the sort of ticking clock regarding the air, the isolation. And so the idea here is rather brilliant, but there is no connection in the writing. He doesn't really know how to use the language as a tool. And I haven't found anything else by him, so maybe he stopped writing. And that's sad because writing is a tool. You need to sort of get feedback and get better. So that's at least what I wrote for that one. For the next prompt, which is emotional/older character, I read the book Ladies Coupe by Anita Nair, and she is an Indian author. And the book is about Akila, who is 45 years old and traveling on a train, and asks the question, does a woman need a man? Because as someone who is 45 and a lady, in India, that is sort of ostracized. She hasn't sort of fulfilled her purpose in life. And she asked this question, can a woman be happy without a man, to the other female passengers in the book. And they each tell their stories about finding a partner or not finding a partner. And I really much enjoyed this book because it made me think, what is the difference between a philosophical book and a feel-good chick-lit book? Because it starts in the framework of a feel-good, pray love type of novel. But then I started to think, but is that what it actually is, or is it more a philosophical book, but in the guise of a feel-good novel? Because the difference between a philosophical novel and a feel-good is that a feel-good presents stories and characters, but tries to wrap everything up with a neat bow. That's why you feel good at the end. But a philosophical book doesn't, because a philosophical book has a question that it doesn't really want to conclude. Even, for example, reading Simone de Beauvoir's books, who have a very clear philosophical feministic point, the purpose of a lot of her books isn't necessarily to answer the question, but forcing you to figure out the question for yourself. So I was wondering about, is this sort of a feel-good book, or is this a philosophical book? And I enjoyed that because it made me have to think about, well, what makes one book in one category or the other? Personally, I do think that I would categorize this as a feel-good book, because while there are it has somewhat of an open ending. The open ending is more around, well, what is going to be the plot? What is going to happen next in the plot of Aquila's life? It doesn't really have an open-ended question to the theme of the book, which is, can a woman be happy without a man? If the book had been more open about that question, made you sort of have to reflect, well, what does it mean to have a good life? And can that sort of be without a man? And not sort of settle it. And that's why I don't think it can be both. I think that a feel-good novel and a philosophical novel are mutual exclusive, because the feel-good wrapping everything up is something you can't really do with a philosophical book. So I think that I would say that this is a very sweet, lovely, feel-good book about the question of women and men's role with one another in a very patriarchal society. But if you've read this book, I am open for other interpretations if you think that it has a different meaning to it. For the next prompt, which was a retelling or a prompt with an LGBTQ point of view, I read Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi. And this is probably one of the books I enjoyed the most out of the 5 that I read. There are 2 ways that a book can be a form of retelling. And this is just a retelling. This doesn't really have a queer themes to it. But there are 2 ways that a book can be a retelling. One is using the plot and the structure of a book, and another way is using the themes of a book. And I've talked about, for example, Dostoevsky. So, and this, I thought that this was going to be a retelling based on the themes of Frankenstein. So what is happening is that there is someone who is traveling around in Baghdad and created the Nameless One. And the Nameless One is then a creature with different body parts from different blown up bodies or killed bodies. And the nameless one is then going around and acting out its revenge on the different body parts. And when he has acted out the revenge, of course, that body parts then falls off. So he keeps having to have new body parts. But this is Baghdad. There are in Iraq, and we are in the middle of the Iraq War. So body parts aren't necessarily a problem to get hold of. So I thought this, but the more I read it and the more I realized that I think this is actually a retelling of just as much the plot of Frankenstein as just the theme of someone stitching up a dead body. Frankenstein is a brilliant book. The original by Mary Shelley is a brilliant book because it's a book about education. It's a book about how do we treat the next generation, and how what the next generation does is a reflection of the upbringing that they received. Frankenstein's monster became a monster because it was treated as a monster by Victor Frankenstein. And that is sort of one of the themes that you sort of see emerging out of this book throughout reading it, because it's talking about what is happening to the next generation of Iraqis now due to everything that is going on with the war and all of the actions that are happening, all the things that they are seeing, and how they are being met in a war-torn country. So, wonderful book in reflection of what does war do to the next generation and how they will deal with, well, life. Then we have the prompt that was fantasy and or a bestseller. And for that, I read And a Day Lasts Longer Than 100 Years. And I'm very sorry that I'm not going to mispronounce his name. It's Tzingis Achamatov. And he is from Kazakhstan. And there are some of the sound combinations there that I'm struggling to get out sometimes. He is, as I stated, an author from Kazakhstan, and he wrote this book about the time when Kazakhstan was a part of the Soviet Union. So this book is about a old man, who is grumpy and upset about his friend having died, and the next generation having no idea about how to properly bury someone. So he has to do the job himself. So he treks a long way, ropes in the dead person's son and son-in-law, and gathers a few friends and say, okay, we are going to take a camel and we are taking a tractor and we are going to bury him properly. And this sort of trek that they are doing lasts just one day. But while he is sort of trekking along over this field to bury his friend that no one else can do properly, he talks about the history between him and his friend. And they were soldiers during the Second World War. Kazakhstan became a part of the Soviet Union in 1936. So 1936, Kazakhstan becomes in the Soviet Union. 1939, World War II starts, so they too travel and fights, and then they come back, and everything is changed. Because now Kazakhstan is properly a part of the Soviet Union. And so they try to continue living their life, but of course, they don't really know what that means. Partly because of the war, partly then because of, well, what is home? Where are we? What happened? They lost their home, in a sense, because Kazakhstan doesn't exist anymore. It's just a part of the Soviet Union. Yes. So what I really enjoyed about the book is that it took the old grump of a character that is just sort of fixated within their old nostalgia and trying to sort of everything was better before when I was young and the new generation doesn't know a thing. And it gives them a very empathetic background in, well, why they became so fixated on the nostalgia.
Yeah.
And this is, so the prompt was bestseller fantasy. This is actually then a bestseller. It's a bestseller in Russia. And it's a book that is used very much in Russian education. So it's one of the staples of Russian education based on what I was told about this book. And that actually surprised me when reading it, because you can absolutely, probably interpret the book as a critique of the Second World War and how that the soldiers that fought in Second World War came back and didn't know what home was, didn't know where I belong. But to me, it's very clearly it's the Soviet Union's that's the problem here, not the Second World War. Though I don't think the Second World War helped. So I was actually surprised about how critical you can read this book. But then again, maybe there is something here that I'm not understanding. So if you've read this book, please let me know what you think about it. And lastly, for the prompt, political/nonfiction, I read Son of Singapore. So Son of Singapore is a book written by Tan Kok Seng, and it is a form of autobiography about his upbringing in Singapore and trying to move off from being a farmer's son into being an author and a writer in a country that was very much on the cusp of existing as a country. So how in Singapore was sort of starting to maybe reflect on maybe we should be an independent country. And it was fine. I had hoped that it would sort of talk more about the political stuff of it, about the discussions. But that wasn't really the main focus. The main focus of it was very much on him and how everyone interacted with him. So if you are interested in memoirs or autobiographies, it probably will be interesting to see how he was living at the time. I thought it wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was fine. So that was what I have read for Asian Readathon. What did you read for Asian Readathon? Have you read any of the books I've mentioned? What do you think about them? And let me know at the comments down below. I'm always in hunt for more Asian books. And thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.